This is a research and technology demonstrator.
XB-1 actually outclimbed a T-38.
Yeah.
XB-1 had its gear down. The T-38 had its gear up, and XB-1 outclimbed it. Yeah. So XB-1 is a performant airplane, and it's just been the highlight of my career to participate in this flight test program. It's such a cool aircraft.
And of course, that's why I consider it Geppetto throttled back a bit on the climb so the other two aircraft could keep up with him.
Absolutely.
That's not an issue going down, of course. And as you can see, we're on the way down, coming down through 22,000 feet. Greg, you mentioned Geppetto's experience. I believe he's had about 200 carrier landings. And in a carrier landing, of course, there's also a chap or a lady that stands on the carrier and gives you landing directions. Now, I believe we're going to use that later on today. So, I mean, you want to take this opportunity just to highlight what that's all about?
Yeah, so in the Navy, they have an individual that stands on the back of the ship called the LSO, or Landing Signal Officer. And this has been employed since the early days of aircraft carriers and still is used today. That individual will help talk a pilot down to the landing point. And in this case, we have an individual who's going to be standing next to the runway, basically right a beam of the touchdown point. And what they'll do is they'll give verbal feedback to the pilot.
Both start a right turn here.
Both about altitude. So on glide slope, if you're above glide slope, below glide slope.
Reset altimeter 3005.
And then if you are left or right of center line. So those are the kinds of calls you hear. When the pilot makes contact with the LSO is called paddles. That is because back in the day they used physical paddles to give these sort of visual indications as well. And so they'll make contact. They will have exclusive use of the comms. The pilot, we will hear him relay in numbers. It might be something like saying 1.8 on initial contact. That is the aircraft's fuel state. That gives paddles information about, do I need to get the airplane down on the ground now, or do we have a go around? Can I wave them off if something's slightly off nominal, etc. And then they'll talk them down. That's not the only landing aid. The primary landing aid that we have on this aircraft is a forward-looking vision system. And so, back in the day, your day, Mike, on Concorde, you guys had to have that droop.
Altimeter is reset 3005.
You had to have that droop nose in the visor so that the pilots could physically.
Here, and that'll set us up for a straight in.
Sorry. So if we could physically see the runway, and have visual contact with the runway, because XB-1, much like the Concorde, when flying on approach at slow speeds, they're very nose high, even though they're descending. So that nose is sort of in the way and blocks the runway. So we actually have two cameras on the nose gear. So when the gear come down, the pilot will have the use of these cameras. The cameras are purely redundant. So if there's any, we have an issue, if there was in a way off chance that we ever had a bird strike, if one of them hit a camera, we'd have a second camera there that the pilot could utilize. And so basically, if Geppetto on approach could see through the airplane, he would naturally be looking down through his multifunction display, and that's where the camera displays. And so he is actually flying on a video screen.
We expect a fuel low momentarily. Continue.
And that is one of the that is one of the technologies that will carry over to the Overture aircraft as well. Cuts out a lot of weight, a lot of complexity, with having a giant mechanism just to move a nose. Now we have high resolution displays and small cameras. So.
Thanks, Greg. Nick, we just heard the control saying we had a fuel low warning. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so that's just an indication that he's on the last remaining fuel tank. So there are 5 fuel tanks in XB-1, and this is expected. This is par for the course. But he's on his main tank, which is the largest tank in XB-1. It holds the most amount of fuel. And he's burned the peripheral tanks, and this is the tank that we typically land on. We like to be on that main tank with approximately less than 2,000 pounds of fuel for landing. XB-1 can land heavier than that, but it's just it's more load on the gear. More energy gets put into the brakes when we land heavy, so it looks as if we're at the sweet spot actually for landing.
So we're actually managing the flight to ensure that we don't land with too much fuel.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And you'll see when XB-1's on final approach just how nose up she is. Of course, there's also the conventional instrument landing system that will help Geppetto, but what's going through his mind right now, I wonder? Well, I kind of guess he won't be thinking too much about the excitement of 3 supersonic dashes. He will be later. He'll be concentrating now on getting the aircraft lined up on the center line on the correct descent path. Now you can see from the digits in front of you, we're just going down through 6,000 feet, bearing in mind that Mojave is 2,800 feet up, so we're really just about 3,000 feet above the ground, slowing right down into final approach speeds. and of course accompanied still by the two aircraft accompanying the chase aircraft, and that's what's giving these wonderful pictures. And I guess it won't be long until we see the gear coming down.
Roll standby gear.
Here it comes.
There it is.
3, 2, 1, mark.
So that's the mark for Geppetto to select the undercarriage down. Here she comes.
Alright, here we 79.
We'll get verification from both Geppetto and the control room here.
Lock, dampers on, fuel systems auto, anti-skids auto, 170.
That's the landing checklist that they just completed. Looks like good gear, Mike. As a landing gear designer, my heart melts every time I see that gear come out. I think it's beautiful.
And this is a really special landing gear, isn't it?
It is. It's bespoke for XB-1. It was a custom gear.
It's
So we're probably about a 6 mile from landing now. I would expect that LSO to take over the comms here momentarily, and that'll be exciting to listen to. So let's listen into the LSO comms.
yeah. I just want to mention we have two LSOs who have supported us on this mission. Zach Pleiss, call sign Sprite, again a former naval aviator, and Charles Wickware, call sign Wignut. I believe we're here to hear Charles on the comms today, would be my guess. But both of them are here today. It's a big flight, and obviously, we all want to be a part of it.
All right, they're coming in for a
So
landing now.
what we'll be listening for is Paddle's contact in a very nice, calm, friendly voice.
And then you'll hear Paddles giving advice to Geppetto about being on glide path, on center line, or maybe even slightly above, or slightly below, or slightly left, or slightly right. And Geppetto's got enough experience flying XB-1 and the XB-1 simulator. He's got many, many hours.
Hundreds of
flying the
landings.
simulator.
Yeah.
So he'll be really familiar with this. So it's just an additional piece of assistance for him to get the right approach path and the right speed.
XB-1 is a test aircraft, and so this is a brand new system.
Paddle contact.
There it is. We'll listen in.
Headwind 79. You're on glide slope. You're on center line. That's 1.8.
So you have glide slope center line and test given the 1.8 fuel call.
That's beautiful.
You're a little high. The wind is down. You're on center line.
And you can see there like a difference between the angle of attack of XB-1 versus the Mirage next to it.
A little high coming down on center line.
Little high.
Like those airplanes are flying the same speed, both in the same descent, and
Oh, there we
and
go.
one of them is substantially nose up.
High coming down on center line.
That high
Ground
angle of
view.
attack, a characteristic of the Yogive Delta wing. Concorde had a high landing angle of attack.
Very similar to the
Approaching glide slope. You're on center line.
Yeah, so this is supposed to be a silent, supersonic Concorde-like passenger jet. It's going to be developed for the 2030s here.
On glide slope. On center line.
Being developed, this test vehicle is being developed by Boom
glide slope.
Supersonic.
On center line 50 feet. On center line 40. On center line 30. 20.
And here it goes, it's landing now.
5, 3.
Yeah, touchdown.
And she's down.
So this was a prototype flight of Boom Supersonic's scaled down crewed test vehicle for a future planned silent supersonic passenger jet. Boom Supersonic is hoping to develop this for the 2030s.